Welcome to English Flowcast, your peaceful space to learn English through stories that touch your heart. Today's story is called The Language of Kindness. It's not about grammar or textbooks. It's about words that heal and lessons that stay in the heart long after the class ends. Our story begins with a teacher, Emma Lewis. She didn't just teach English. She taught people how to believe in themselves again. It was Emma's first day teaching at Hope Learning Center, a small community school in a noisy part of the city. The building was old, walls covered with children's drawings and faded quotes like, "Education is the seed of tomorrow." She took a deep breath and stepped into her classroom. 10 students sat there, different ages, faces full of silence, curiosity, and a little fear. They were immigrants, workers, and young dreamers, people who had come to learn English, not just for jobs, but for dignity. Emma smiled warmly and said, "Good morning, everyone." A few whispered back, "Good morning." She smiled again. "That's perfect. Now let's learn together, slowly, kindly." You don't need perfect words to make someone feel seen. A smile, a soft tone, a patient heart. They speak louder than vocabulary. The days passed. Some students learned quickly. Some struggled with pronunciation. Some wanted to quit. One evening, Emma noticed a boy sitting alone after class. His name was Ravi, a quiet young man from India. He held his notebook tightly. "Miss," he said softly, "I think English is not for me. I forget everything." Emma sat beside him. "Ravi, do you know the word yet?" He looked confused. "Yet?" She smiled. "Yes, you can't speak English yet. That word means your story is not finished." Ravi looked down, then smiled for the first time. "Not finished," he repeated slowly. "Not finished yet." "I can't do this" turns to "I can't do this yet." That single word turns walls into doors. One rainy afternoon, a storm broke one of the classroom windows. The wind blew papers everywhere. Students rushed to help Emma pick them up. Laughter filled the room. It felt like family. After class, Emma taped a large cardboard over the window. On it, she wrote in large blue letters, "We learn together. We grow together." The next day, one student added in red marker, "And we smile together." Another wrote, "And we fail together." Soon, the broken window became a wall of encouragement. Every mistake was just another message of hope. Don't hide your errors. They're your teachers in disguise. Every Friday, Emma went to a small cafe near the school. One evening, she met the owner, Mr. Lee, an elderly man who had lived in the neighborhood for 40 years. "You're the new teacher, right?" he asked with a kind smile. "Yes," she said, "trying my best." He nodded slowly. "You know, I never learned English properly," he said, "but people remember how I made them feel, not how I spoke." Emma smiled. "That's the best English lesson I've ever heard. When you speak, don't focus on being perfect. Focus on being real. Your kindness will translate." The evening classes were always harder. Students came tired after work. Some looked half asleep. Emma tried something new. She wrote one word on the board: courage. She asked, "Who can use this word in a sentence?" A woman named Maria, a cleaner from Brazil, raised her hand. She said slowly, "Courage is coming to class, even when I am tired." Everyone clapped softly. Emma's eyes shined. "That's perfect, Maria. That's courage in real life." It's not about big speeches. It's showing up when it's easier to stay away. After 2 months, it was time for a small test. The students looked nervous. Some whispered prayers. Emma walked to the board and said, "Don't worry about marks. This test isn't to judge you. It's to show you how far you've come." When she handed out the papers, she saw smiles and fear slowly fading. Later, that evening, Ravi came running to her desk. "Miss, I passed. I never passed before." Emma smiled and said softly, "You see, Ravi, you were ready all along. You just needed someone to remind you. Be that person for someone else and for yourself." The next morning, Emma found a folded piece of paper on her desk. Inside, it said in careful handwriting, "Dear Miss, I don't speak English very well, but when I am in your class, I feel brave." She read it twice, then placed it inside her notebook carefully. Sometimes the smallest notes carry the biggest truths. You don't teach with lessons. You teach with presence. Every calm word, every smile, every small kindness, they become lessons people never forget. That night, as Emma locked the classroom, she whispered to herself, "They're learning English, and I'm learning kindness." Because in every class, in every conversation, in every word shared with love, a new kind of language was born. The language of kindness. It was a rainy Thursday evening. The students were tired after a long day of work. Emma noticed their heavy eyes and slow smiles. She said softly, "Let's do something different today. Let's take English outside the classroom." The students looked curious. "Outside?" Robbie asked. Emma nodded. "Yes, we'll use English to make someone's day better. Not for grammar, not for grades, just for good." They looked at each other, unsure but excited. Maria raised her hand. "Like a kindness project?" Emma smiled. "Exactly. We'll call it the Street of Voices. Because every kind word is a voice that can change a street." The fastest way to learn something is to use it to help someone else. The students gathered after class. They made simple plans. Write short notes of kindness in English, smile at strangers, and help people on the street. Ravi wrote, "You are enough." Maria wrote, "You can do hard things." Others wrote, "Your smile matters." "You are doing great today." Emma collected all the notes and smiled. "Tomorrow," she said, "we'll turn the street outside our school into a place that speaks kindness." Every kind word builds a bridge between two hearts that might never have met otherwise. The next day, the students arrived early. They taped the colorful notes to walls, street lamps, and shop windows. The neighborhood was usually busy and cold, but that morning it felt different, softer, warmer. A man selling fruit read a note out loud. You are stronger than you think. He smiled and said, Who wrote this? Ravi answered shyly, We did, sir. English class project. The man laughed gently. Then your English is beautiful. Maria helped an old woman cross the road and said in simple English, You look lovely today. The woman didn't understand every word, but she smiled widely and said, Thank you, dear. Emma watched from across the street, her heart full. Her students weren't just learning language, they were living it. Words are more than sounds. They carry feelings, warmth, and courage. When used kindly, they can change a place. In the afternoon, the class visited a small bakery, owned by a quiet man named Mr. Adams. He barely spoke and always looked tired. His bakery smelled of fresh bread and cinnamon, but his eyes held a deep loneliness. Maria whispered, He never smiles. Emma nodded and said softly, Let's change that.
Ravi walked up to the counter and said slowly, Good afternoon, sir. Your bread smells amazing. Mr. Adams looked surprised, then chuckled. Thank you. I bake it myself. Another student added, You bake with love, I think. Mr. Adams laughed for the first time in months. He gave them free muffins. Emma smiled as they left. You see, kindness always comes back, like an echo. A kind act is never small. It travels, touches, and returns, often when you least expect it. That evening, a local newspaper reporter passed by the street. He noticed the colorful kindness notes and the happy people reading them. He asked the fruit seller, Who did this? The man pointed at the school. The English class. The teacher, Miss Emma. The next morning, an article appeared. The Street of Voices. How one teacher and her students changed a neighborhood. When Emma saw it, she smiled. Not because of the recognition, but because kindness had found its own microphone. You don't need fame to make an impact. Do good quietly. The world always finds a way to notice. That evening, when Emma walked to class, people on the street greeted her warmly. A shopkeeper said, Good job, teacher. Children waved from balconies. The street that once felt gray and busy was now alive with smiles. Inside the classroom, Emma said softly, You all changed something today. You made people feel seen. Ravi raised his hand. Miss, I think we learn English not just for jobs, but to make people happy. Emma nodded slowly, her eyes bright. Exactly, Ravi. That's the real language. The language of kindness. Learning is not only for success. It's for connection. It's for touching lives with what you know. After class, Emma walked home under soft streetlights. The rain had just stopped. The notes were still fluttering gently in the wind. She stopped by one lamppost and read a note written by Maria. Kindness is a language everyone understands. A small child passing by looked up and asked Emma, Teacher, what does that mean? Emma knelt down and said, It means you don't need to speak the same words. to speak the same heart. The child smiled, and in that moment, the street truly spoke. Not in English, but in kindness. That night, the street of voices glowed quietly under the rain. People read, smiled, helped, and talked. And all because one teacher believed that words can heal when spoken with care.
It was Monday morning. Emma entered the school smiling, but something felt different. The principal, Mr. Carter, was waiting at her desk. He looked serious. "Emma," he said, "we've received a complaint about your class." Emma's heart sank. A complaint? From whom? Mr. Carter handed her a letter. "Some parents think your students are disturbing businesses on the street with their kindness notes. They say it's unprofessional, not educational." Emma read the letter slowly. Her hands trembled slightly. She looked up and said softly, "We were only trying to help." The principal sighed. "I know, but some people don't see it that way. We'll have to pause your outdoor projects." Emma nodded quietly. She didn't argue. She just said, "Understood." But as she walked to her classroom, her heart felt heavy. Even the purest intentions can be misunderstood. Do good anyway. Kindness doesn't need permission. That day, the students noticed Emma's quiet mood. Usually, she began class with laughter and greetings. But today, she just smiled softly and wrote on the board, "Kindness under pressure." Maria raised her hand. "Miss, something wrong?" Emma hesitated, then told them about the complaint. The class fell silent. Ravi clenched his fist. "That's not fair, miss. We didn't hurt anyone." Emma nodded. "I know, Ravi, but this is our next lesson. How to stay kind even when others aren't. True strength doesn't shout. It stays calm, kind, and steady, especially when tested." Later that week, Emma went with 2 of her students to buy supplies for class. At the stationery shop, the owner, a grumpy middle-aged man, snapped at them impatiently. "Hurry up, you're blocking the line," he shouted. The students froze. Maria looked at Emma with teary eyes. Emma smiled gently and said, "You're right, sir. We'll be quick." When they paid, Emma added softly, "Thank you for your patience. Have a good day." The man looked surprised. No one had ever responded to his anger with politeness. He didn't speak. But when they left, Maria whispered, "Miss, why you say thank you? He was rude." Emma smiled, because kindness is not about who deserves it. It's about who needs it. Anyone can be kind when life is easy. The real test is being kind when life isn't. The next week, one of Emma's students, Farah, stopped coming to class. She was a single mother who worked 2 jobs. Emma called her. "Farah, we miss you in class. Are you okay?"
Farah sighed. "Miss, people laugh at my accent at work. They say I sound funny.
I don't want to speak anymore. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, then said gently, Farah, do you know what I hear when you speak? I hear courage. Every word you say carries strength. Farah was silent, then whispered, Thank you, miss. I'll come tomorrow. Don't silence yourself because of fear. Your voice is not perfect. It's powerful. The next day, Emma was called to a school board meeting. The same people who had complained sat across from her. A woman said coldly, We think English should be taught seriously, not with emotional activities. Emma listened quietly, then said softly, Ma'am, English is serious, but kindness is part of communication. Without it, no language truly connects. There was silence in the room. Even the principal looked moved. Mr. Carter finally said, Emma, maybe we can find a balance. She nodded, smiling faintly. That's all I ask. You don't need to shout to be heard. The calmest voices often create the biggest change. A week later, Emma and her students were allowed to continue their kindness project, but only near the school, not the whole street. The students didn't complain. They simply smiled and began again. They hung new notes that said, Be kind even when it's hard. Your calm is stronger than anger. Love always wins. A few days later, Mr. Adams, the bakery owner, walked into Emma's class with fresh bread. He smiled and said, This is for your students. Your kindness helped me through a bad week. The class clapped. Ravi whispered to Maria, See, kindness always comes back. When you plant kindness, it may take time to grow, but it always comes back, multiplied. A few days later, the woman who had written the complaint letter visited the school. She said quietly, Miss Emma, I was wrong. My daughter takes your class now. She talks about kindness every day. Thank you. Emma smiled, her eyes soft and shining. Thank you for coming. We're all learning, aren't we? The woman nodded. Yes, from you. It may not win the argument today, but it wins the heart tomorrow. That night, Emma walked home past the street of voices. The rain had washed some of the notes away, but a few still remained, fluttering softly under the streetlights. One note read, Kindness never disappears. It just finds new hearts. Emma stopped, smiled, and whispered, Yes, it always does. It was a sunny Friday afternoon when Mr. Carter, the principal, entered the classroom with a smile. Good news, he said, clapping his hands. The community center is hosting a neighborhood event next week. They've invited your class to perform something in English. The students gasped. Ravi's eyes widened. Perform? On stage? Emma smiled softly. Yes, Ravi, on stage. Maria whispered, In front of people? Emma nodded, laughing gently. Yes, in front of people, and with courage. The class erupted in nervous chatter. Emma raised her hand and said, We'll do something special. Not a song, not a dance. We'll share the language of kindness. When life gives you a stage, don't use it to show off. Use it to shine light on others. For the next week, the class stayed after school every day. They practiced pronunciation, worked on sentences, and wrote short speeches about kindness. Emma helped them shape their words, not to sound perfect, but to sound true. Speak from your heart, she told them. People don't remember grammar, they remember feelings. Ravi wrote, Kindness is not English or Hindi. It is heart language. Maria wrote, "When I say thank you, I feel like I am saying, I see you." Farah, who once wanted to quit, wrote, "People laughed at my accent. Now I laugh with them because I am brave." Every sentence was like a little candle, small but full of light. Your words are powerful when they are honest. Truth needs no decoration. The evening before the event, Emma stayed late in the classroom. The lights were dim, and the sound of rain filled the room. She looked at the wall where the students had taped kindness notes months ago. Some were fading, some were torn, but they were still there, strong, colorful, and alive. She whispered softly, "Tomorrow they'll speak, and the world will listen." You may never know how your lessons grow, but they do, quietly, beautifully, and forever. The community hall was full of people. Children, parents, shopkeepers, and neighbors sat waiting. The banner on stage read, "Voices of Hope," presented by Hope Learning Center. Emma stood with her students backstage. She could see their nervous faces. "Take a deep breath," she said softly. "You're not performing. You're sharing." They nodded. When the lights came on, Ravi walked up first, holding his small card. "Good evening. My name is Ravi. I was afraid to speak English, but my teacher said, 'You are not finished yet.' So I am here, not perfect, but proud." The audience clapped gently. Maria stepped next. "My English is not strong, but my heart is." Kindness helped me find my voice. Then Farah, trembling slightly, spoke into the mic. "People laughed at my accent. Now I laugh with love, because I learned calm, relaxed, slow, precise English learning. The world speaks many accents of kindness." The hall grew quiet, the kind of silence filled with emotion. Emma watched from backstage, tears shining in her eyes. When one person stands bravely, others find their voice too. Finally, Emma stepped onto the stage. The audience clapped warmly. She smiled and said softly, "I teach English, but in this class, we also learn to listen, not just to words, but to hearts." She paused, looking at her students. "These brave people taught me something I'll never forget. The most powerful language in the world is kindness. It doesn't need translation. It doesn't need perfection. It only needs courage." The audience stood and applauded. Some people had tears in their eyes. Even Mr. Carter, the principal, was clapping with pride. You don't need a classroom to teach. Your actions are your real lessons. After the event, people came forward to thank the students. A shopkeeper said, "Your words touched me." A little girl told Maria, "I want to speak English like you." Even the woman who had once complained hugged Emma and said, "You were right. Kindness does belong in education." That night, the newspaper headline read, "The Language of Kindness: How One Teacher and 10 Students Changed a Community." Months later, the term ended. Emma's students completed their English course. On the last day, they surprised her with a small notebook. On the cover, it said, To Miss Emma, our kind teacher. Inside were handwritten notes from each student. Ravi wrote, "You taught us English, but you gave us confidence." Maria wrote, "You taught us to listen with love." Farah wrote, "You didn't just teach us words, you taught us wings." Emma closed the notebook, smiling with quiet joy. She whispered, "They learned English, and I learned humanity." That evening, Emma walked one last time along the street of voices. Most of the kindness notes had faded with time, but one small note still fluttered under a street lamp. It said, "Kindness never disappears. It becomes someone's hope." Emma stood for a moment, closed her eyes, and smiled. She didn't need to teach tomorrow, because kindness was already speaking in every word, every heart, every corner of that little street. And that is the story of Emma, a teacher who taught the world that English is not just a subject, it's a connection. Her classroom became a bridge between strangers. Her students became voices of hope, and her legacy whispered softly through time. The world speaks many languages, but kindness is the only one that everyone understands. Languages may fade, accents may change, but kindness never gets lost in translation.